What does it mean to be one of the 6 great generals of Qin? Does it mean to be better than any other general? To be considered unbeatable? To be the blade of the king? That they have the right to freely wage war? Or to be so fearsome, just hearing their name would make the enemy tremble with fear and want to flee? The answer is all of the above and oh so much more. Now, given how the Kingdom of Qin is rapidly expanding its borders thanks to all of these legendary figures, and with the bold declaration of King Sei in the recent chapter 847 that he believes the new Zhao invasion army are the strongest in all of Qin's history, I believe the time is right to take the 2 generations of these legendary figures to create the ultimate Qin 6 Greats that will lay absolute waste to any enemy that stands in their way if they work together or separately. But as always, Kingdom fans, before we go any further, I want to remind you to smash that button down below, and while you're down there, you may as well hit that subscribe button with the notification bell so you can stay up to date with the channel and help the YouTube algorithm get the Kingdom series out into the world, which I know is something that we all want. So to start off, we have to first go through the list of candidates for this position. Starting off, we have the original 6 Greats: Hakuki, Wuki, Kyo, Wukotsu, Shibasaku, and of course Koshu. And then we have the current generation: Mobu, To, Yotanwa, Wusen, and Kanki. But for the sake of this video, I will be adding a fill-in character to take the place of the 6th Great. And no, it isn't Shin or the others as much as we may like it to be. The position has to go to the only person actually currently active and worthy of that position, but isn't in it, and that of course can only be the current chief of the Qin military, Shohei Kun. Now, I know what some of you may be saying: he isn't good enough, or he isn't actually worthy. And to anyone who says that, I say to you, you are very wrong. Not only was this man educated in the art of war by the 6th Great General Master Strategist Koshu, he is a top tier combatant who even in his younger days was considered on par with Mobu, who as we all know is a freaking monster. He was also scouted and recruited by the mischievous Ryufi, who had an undeniable eye for talent. And then to top it off, his actions throughout the whole series have been acknowledged by multiple top-level military, political, and academic personnel in all of the other states. So there is no doubt in my mind that while he has taken a back step from the front lines, he could just as easily take up the mantle need be. Now, to create the ultimate 6 Greats, I came up with 2 methods. I could either compare them rank by rank, as in the last generation's number 1 versus the new generation's number 1, which would be Hakuki versus Mobu. But I could make a whole video based off of that one battle alone, so I decided to go with my second method, and that is breaking down the generals into their key role, or another term being their main characteristic in the 6 Greats, and then comparing the generals who fit into that role. So the first role that we're going to start off with is the role of the most powerful. Now, we all know that this role is going to fall to Mobu and Wukotsu. I know that this is the most obvious of choices, but I should explain why. Wukotsu was undoubtedly a powerful general who sliced his way up the ranks with his great axe and leading armies from the front, setting a prime example of bravery and pure power. And now, as we know, when he led an army into Chu, he was defeated by a young Kanmei and then retreated, and it is presumed that he succumbed to his wounds, aka he died. Then we have Mobu, the first of this new generation's 6 Greats, who not only defeated the very same Kanmei, despite being on death's doorstep, not to mention the dude has repeatedly throughout the series shown his capability for immense and ruthless destruction, whose feats and capabilities have shown to be such a threat that he was then put in charge of protecting Qin's border with their greatest threat, Kanmei's homeland, Chu. And even if we get to know more about Wukotsu in the future, I can't see my choice for this role changing at all. So obviously the winner for this role will be Mobu, the self-proclaimed strongest man in all of China. And then we come to the second role in the 6 Greats, and that is going to be the role of the heavy offense-oriented general. Now this position could only really go to the 2 ladies of the 2 generations, Yotanwa and Kyo. For Kyo, we admittedly don't know much, but she has a surprising amount in common with Yotanwa when you think about all the things that we do know. Now, skipping over the part that they were the only females in their generation's 6th grades, they have very similar command styles. We know that both of them are very skilled when it comes to conquering cities. Kyo had captured 99 before her demise, and while we have only actually seen Yotanwa take a handful of cities, we know she has conquered countless mountains and the tribes that lay within them. So I'm willing to count those as cities, especially once you see how her city in the mountains looks like. It is literally a natural fortress built into the mountain. Not only this, we know that they have extremely loyal, grisly looking followers, and of course we know that it is out of loyalty, admiration and respect. But sadly, you always have people like the Figo King who want a bit more, even though they probably will never get it. And if Yotanwa has her way, he definitely won't. Now, we don't know if Kyo had this problem, but I'm willing to bet she had plenty of admirers in her army also. But bring it back to the best general for the role, we have to give it to Yotanwa. Now, I'm not saying that as a commander, Yotanwa is better than Kyo. Kyo was an absolute prodigy at warfare, who despite being the youngest of her generation's Great Six, was just as feared as any other. But you have to take their main armies into account also. Now, despite Kyo's army being through a massive amount of bloody battles with her that always had high casualty rates, and then them coming out of them on the other side stronger than ever, you have to remember who we are talking about here. Yotanwa has a mountain tribe army. They have literally been feared for centuries for their ferocity and their resilience in battle. Not to mention the countless acts of borderline wild animal-like behavior and attacking styles we have seen in the series. You can argue all you want, but it is my genuine and firm belief if you were to pin these two commanders against each other, the Yotanwa army would come out on top, and so that's why the role of heavy offense-oriented commander goes to Yotanwa. So now we come to the third role, and that is the role of the strategist of the 6th grades. And to clarify, I don't mean the strategist for the 6th grades, I mean the general that prefers to use tactics and not fight personally. Now, we all know who the two competing in this category are going to be, and that is of course Wu Sen and Koshu. Now, I know that Wu Sen is capable of wielding a weapon and Koshu flat out refused to use one, but we all know Wu Sen is a strategist at heart, despite us seeing him momentarily wield a glaive in the Western Zhao invasion. But you have to remember, while he was being surrounded and chased down by the armies of Sika, coming literally inches close to death, he still retreated without picking up a weapon. I mean, the dudes didn't even draw the sword that was on his waist. So we have these two excellent strategists who seem to have polar opposite personalities or personal traits or even reputations, as you want to look at it. And yes, we know very little about Koshu when compared to Wu Sen, yet what we do know is truly incredible. We know he wasn't from any big or majorly influential family, but still rose to the rank of one of Qin's 6th grades from his strategic genius alone. And if that wasn't enough, he was rumored to be so brilliant that he wasn't just the commander of his army, but he was the strategist behind the 5 other Greats movements. And I would need you guys to listen, because I do not want to undersell how amazing something like that would be if true. Aside from the fact that he was basically acting as Qin's pseudo head of military, if this rumor was true, then he had the absolute respect, trust, and faith of the other generals. And thanks to his decisions, Qin's borders grew massively in their era under King Shou. So instead of 6 separate entities acting as they saw fit, they moved as a solid, coordinated team throughout the 7 kingdoms like pieces on a chessboard. Almost like how Riboku pointed out Shohai-kun was doing by taking Sanyo just before the coalition arc, who was, by the way, taught by Koshu, so it's probable he learned that method from Koshu. Now, if people have watched some of my videos about Wu Sen, then it is no secret I am not a fan of, but I do respect his genius. Now, Wu Sen is the exact opposite of what I just said about Koshu. He had the benefit of his family name to aid his military power growth, and unlike Koshu, he is not trusted or even liked by the other greats of his age, but he is respected by them at the very least. We know that Wu Sen is strategically on par with other great strategists, such as Riboku, and even acknowledged by Koshu when he was still very young. Not to mention his numerous successful campaigns, and although not being acknowledged by Renpa, we have to remember that he did outwit Renpa with a strategic withdrawal into a fortress the mighty Renpa did not foresee. However, personally, I've always seen Wu Sen less as a strategist, but more as an extreme gambler when it comes to his big battles. Despite claiming he only takes on battles he knows he can win, he often enters these battles with too many unknown variables and gambles that things will reach his predictions. Now, for the sake of argument, comparing his complete defeat to Sika is not fair, because thanks to Mobu, we've known for a very long time that overwhelming and unknown power can destroy even the best laid out plans. So my prime example to show his gambling habit will be his faith in Shin and the right wing during the Western Zhao invasion. To say it was a reckless gamble is a complete understatement. It was just absolutely wild. Wu Sen had no experience fighting with Shin, and yet put enormous faith in him simply because he had finally taken up the glaive of the GOAT Wu Qi, which you need incredible strength and skill to wield. Not to mention, even if all of that worked out, there was still the gamble on supplies being delivered by the king of Qi to Gyo. Despite them agreeing to deliver it, if it was not delivered until the last moment possible, another 2 or 3 days, and Zhao could have taken back Gyo. They could have just climbed the walls of Gyo and just taken it. The Qin army was too weak and too malnourished to put up a real fight. And there are at least a dozen other examples in the series I could give to prove my point that Wu Sen is a huge gambler. And so it is my firm belief that Koshu is not only the better strategist, but he is also the better option to make the ultimate 6th grade generals. Now, moving on to the 4th role of the list, I have deemed it the name The Unknown. So to give an example of what this means, I will use Shibashu of the Zhao 3 Greats. While he is now a known factor, you have to remember he was basically completely unknown until his appearance in the last Qin-Zhao war. Now, people knew he existed, but they didn't know the quality of his army or his command. And that is mostly what led to him and his army's massive success against Wu Sen. He is powerful, but nobody knew how powerful. Shibashu and Riboku both knew that, and they used it to their advantage. And so back to the role, we have the only 2 commanders that can fit this role, in my opinion, is Shibasaku and Shohai Kun. Now, we know nothing about Shibasaku other than the fact he was one of the first generation 6th grades, so obviously he was powerful in his own way. However, we do know a little bit about Shohai Kun. Like I said earlier, not only was the man educated in the art of war by the 6th grade generals Koshu, he is a top tier combatant who was compared to Mobu in his younger days. He was scouted and recruited by Ryufi, who had an undeniable eye for talent, and then to top it off, his actions throughout the whole series have been acknowledged by the highest ranking officials in literally every single other state. In terms of leadership, his followers show absolute and unquestioned loyalty towards him, not to mention his ability to plan many steps ahead, be it on the nation conquering level or in the heat of battle. As we see in his battle against the Juteki, not only does he lead the charge, slicing his way through the enemies and one-shotting Wategi, the Duke of the Juteki, in the lead up to this, he sends out his vassals to deal with the enemies before they have even made their move. He's capable of predicting his opponent's movements before they make them, and he can do it with just the slightest of glance while surrounded by enemies. So I don't care what anyone says, that takes extreme skill. And seeing as how we know literally nothing about Shibasaku, it's only logical that Shohai Kun takes the role of the unknown in the ultimate 6th grades. And for the record, I know that in the history books, Shibasaku was one of the greatest generals of his time, but I like to keep the channel and all the videos manga accurate. Now, with 4 of the 6 needed to make the ultimate Qin 6th grades, we come to what is undoubtedly the 2 hardest decisions with the 4 best characters in both of the 6 great generations going head to head. I fully expect plenty of people to agree and also disagree with my decisions, so please drop a comment down below and I will respond to any debate you may wish to have, because we all know who is left and they are all beloved characters, so I fully expect people to defend their favourite generals. Getting right on into it, we come to the 5th role of the Qin 6 Greats, and I have dubbed it as the all-rounder. Now, it's fairly self-explanatory what that means. The general for the all-rounder category needs to be master in all types of warfare, be it offense, defense, strategy, combat, psychological, and anything and everything else that may come into play. And who else fits this role better than the 2 goats, the master and his student, who is also a master, the 2 great generals of the heavens, Wookiee and To. Now, needless to say, this was a tough decision, as I am sure many of you guys can understand, but we have to do this from an objective point of view if we really want to make the ultimate 6 Greats. So, Wookiee, the monstrous bird of Qin, feared throughout every nation, even the ones he didn't visit, gained his moniker from his ability to appear on the battlefield as if he fell out of the sky and into the center of the battlefield. The dude was a glaive master with a heart so pure he put saints to shame, and of course a genius in every sense of the word. Seeing as how he died early on in the series, but still to this day is a very relevant character, just proves his importance not only as a general but throughout the whole series, and the impact he has had on it. Then you take in the fact that also after dying so early on, we got to see what a beast he is, and he was not even in his prime. However, despite having such an insanely awesome record, we don't actually know much about his accomplishments. Now, we have to take into account that he is part of the infamous Wu family, so that's definitely helped him rise in the ranks, and of course we know that even from a young age he was an absolute prodigy, even outclassing the likes of Shou Bun-kun, who as far as we know is still the only living person who fought alongside a young Wookiee. Then we have to take into account the fact that during his time he helped massively expand the borders of Qin and literally had the likes of Wei and Han pissing themselves at the thought of him coming. But since we are staying neutral in this decision, we have to take note of his battle records. No doubt he had countless victories, but he also had multiple stalemates with the likes of the Zhao 3 Great Heavens, Renpa and Rin Shoujo, also technically the Wei Fire Dragons like Gaimo, but that isn't exactly the same situation, and that's a discussion for a different day. And of course, Wookiee's quite frankly crushing defeat to Riboku despite his incredible ability to predict and read the battlefield. And then we come to To, a man who was not only entrusted with the Wookiee army after his demise, but also a man whose abilities weren't below his to begin with. So in other words, Wookiee admits that To is just as skilled as him when it comes to warfare. Now, I can't say who was the better fighter because, as you know, Wookiee wielded the glaive, To wields the sword, but he can cause an insane amount of carnage just as easily with that thing. Here's the biggest difference between Wookiee and To. We know nothing about To's past, but plenty about his present, and this will surely affect this decision. As we see in the Han invasion arc, To bests the Han hero Rakua Khan, and quite easily I might add to that. And then using nothing but pure brilliant psychological warfare, he took down a nation's capital and conquered a kingdom with only 2 battles. Now, we don't know if this is how Wookiee would have done things, but we do know that To did what Wookiee could not, and toppled a nation with a strategy nobody could have imagined. But for argument's sake, let's also throw in To's known battle record. Under his command, his army has never lost a battle, be it thanks to his elite commanders, his ability to see the potential in young commanders such as Shin, Wuhan, Muten, or even just his pure genius in every sense of the word. Throw in the fact he can withstand the likes of the true genius general Kareen and repel the Wei Fire Dragon Gohume time and time again. So I feel relatively comfortable in saying that of these 2 legendary generals, To is the better one and lives up to the role of the all-rounder in the 6 Greats. And so guys, before we get into this final Great General Showdown, I just wanted to remind you that if ye enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button down below, click that subscribe button with the notification bell so you can stay up to date with the channel. And I can't wait to read all of your comments. I would love to hear people's opinion on this topic. Now we come to the final role we need filled to create the ultimate 6 great generals, and I have given the title of insane but brilliant. And who better to fill this role than the mad genius Hakuki and the infamous Kanki the Beheader. Personally, I think this title is the best description for these two, especially when we consider the fact that these two are the coldest of the bunch. And for the record guys, this was undoubtedly the hardest decision to make for this whole video. Now, like I've mentioned multiple times, we know very little about the past 6 greats. We know even less about their armies, but what we do know about Hakuki is more than enough to prove he is worthy of this title and to also send shivers down our spines. So Hakuki was the first among his generation's 6 greats, and while it has never been said, we know through comments made in the series that the great generals rankings are just that, rankings. So we know that Hakuki was a better general than Wuki, Shibasaku, and Koshu, Kyo, and Wukotsu. We know his tactics have long been an inspiration and emulated for the likes of Wu Sen, and he had an unbeaten streak of victories against any and all opponents, even the likes of Renpa, though you could make the argument he never truly defeated Renpa because he never killed him. But then the same could be said for Wu Sen and Riboku. Going down that path is long and complicated, but while interesting, it's a discussion to have on a different day. Anyway, back to Hakuki. Not only did he have wild achievements under his belt, but he has some dark ones too, which is why he's insane. And while the details on this topic are very scarce, what we know for a fact is that after a massive victory against an enormous Zhao army, he had managed to take 400,000 prisoners of war. Not knowing what to do with them, instead of returning them to Zhao where they could once again fight against him, he chose to instead dig massive crater-like pits in the ground and buried all these prisoners alive, showing no remorse, no hesitation, no struggle, and ignoring the pleas of his lieutenants, creating the eternal burning hatred that Zhao has for Qin. And honestly, who could blame them? To top it off, Hakuki went on to take his own life soon afterwards, presumably because he was insane, or because the spirits of his victims drove him that way, and that's actually a possibility because we have repeatedly seen throughout the series that there is an afterlife, or a spirit world, or a spirit realm, or just vengeful spirits, whatever name you want to give it, we know that it exists. And then we come to Kanki the Beheader, Kanki the 5th Great. What can we truly say about this man to do him justice? For the longest time, he was thought to be a mad genius at warfare who didn't even have a heart, if not a soul. And as it turns out, not only did he have a heart, but he may have had the largest heart of all. However, as much as I would love to talk about this man in great detail, we have to stick to the point of the video, which of course is Kanki. And is he a good enough general that he deserves to be among the ultimate 6 greats? Now, in most scenarios, I would say yes, absolutely, without a doubt. Put him right up there, up at number 1, 2, maybe 3. This man was acknowledged by literally every single person, including Riboku, that he may have been Qin's greatest weapon. Sadly, however, we have to remember who he is up against, Hakuki, so we have to take an objective look at this. Now, Kanki is known for 2 things: pulling off insane victories nobody thought was possible, and acts of brutal and horrific violence, not unlike Hakuki. Now, Kanki defeated armies twice and triple his army size, defeated some extremely notorious generals such as the guardian deity of Kantan, Kocho, and was the closest Qin general to come to defeating Riboku in the series so far. Not to mention, he always kept casualties of his own army to a minimum. Now, we don't know how many people Kanki has massacred in his acts of violence and manipulation, but we do know it wasn't 400,000. We know that the largest at a single time was 100,000, but even then, he was far more merciful than Hakuki. He gave his prisoners a quick death and even let it be unknown to them that they were going to be executed, which I know isn't great, but it's still better than being buried alive and then being smothered by dirt or other people being thrown on top of them. That's some dark shit right there. Now when it comes to Kanki's battle record, nobody could argue with it, but he was extremely weak in any terrain other than mountains and forests. His speciality was guerrilla and psychological warfare, which, while very effective, is 1,000 times harder to pull off when it comes to having an army in the tens of thousands. As much as I enjoyed arcs centered around this guy, his downfall was only a matter of time. And while I would love to get into the highly technical talks on him and his battles, it's because of all this that I regretfully have to make Hakuki take the role of insane but brilliant and fill in the final spot of the ultimate Qin 6 great generals. And so here you go, Kingdom fans. I firmly believe that these 6 legendary figures, Mobu, Koshu, To, Hakuki, Shohai-kun, and Yotanwa, will lay absolute waste and destruction to any enemy that stands in their path. Be it an army or a nation, these 6 will not fail or fall to any foe. Now, if you guys have any thoughts or difference of opinion on these lineups, I would love to hear it, so feel free to drop a comment down below and I will do my best to reply to every single one of them. And while you're down there, remember to also smash that like button and click that subscribe so you can stay up to date with the channel and all things Kingdom. Looking forward to seeing you in the next one.